Proclamation directing the National Guard to be deployed to the U.S.-Mexico border. Another story coming across the wires right now. Facebook CEO Mark Zuckerberg will testify before the Senate Judiciary and Commerce Committees on April 10th next week, so watch for that. As we have been discussing, a new poll finds a third of Canadians don't believe in the science behind climate change, and many don't support carbon taxes. So what are policymakers supposed to do? Let's bring in our panel, and a reminder, this conversation is also live on CBC News Facebook page and on YouTube, and you can join in with your thoughts and questions, and we'll bring those into our discussion. In Vancouver, Charles Adler is the host of Charles Adler Tonight on Chorus Radio Network, and in Ottawa, Susan Riley is a freelance columnist, very big interest in the environment. Susan, I'm going to start with you. Why do you think some people don't want to believe the science?
Well, first of all, I don't think we should overstate how many people don't want to believe the science. I mean, 70% of people have accepted it, and that is quite a gain on even with over the last decade. Among the 30% that remain skeptical or outright hostile to the notion, some are probably ignorant of the science, and by that I don't mean they are ignorant people. I mean it's an immensely complicated subject, and people have busy lives and they have other concerns, and they might be uneasy about what's happening around them, or they might just find it simpler to say it's got nothing to do with climate change, it's just weather. That's one cadre, and the other I think are cynical, and they would be people who, for a variety of reasons, political, economic reasons, simply don't want to face up to it because that would mean having to do something about it. So I think those are the two main groups that are resistant.
Charles, what do you think?
First of all, I don't know what it is about you, Carol, but you always get me to confess. So let me confess right from the beginning. I did not too badly in school, but I did better in the subjects that required, let's say, an active imagination than a scientific mind. So I don't want to pretend to be a scientist.
No.
But I will say this, that for many people, all they have to do is look at -20s on the prairie overnights in the month of April. All they have to do is look at snow on the streets of Toronto in April, and they say to themselves, nothing much has changed. It's a cold country. The global warming thing is a bit of a swindle.
Yeah, let me bring some of what we're seeing online right now. We humans are the cause of this right now. The Great Lakes were not carved out of glaciers. Just a hairdo on YouTube asks, that's just a airdo. The Earth has warmed and cooled throughout history. Why are all the other planets in the solar system warming as well? Josh Stevens on YouTube says there is a northern Arctic warming, but there is no known connection to weather events in the lower latitudes. No one seems to be talking about the sea ice that is expanding in Antarctica. And Philip Carden says, yes, it is caused by human activity. It's called geoengineering. So we're seeing, a grouping of different ideas about climate, but how much of this is also aligned politically? Is there a political divide anymore on this issue? Susan?
I think there certainly is, and mainly the mainstream conservative parties have mostly aligned themselves against doing anything about climate change, whether or not they believe it exists. I think very few of them are in total denial about the existence of climate change. There are quibbles about how urgent it is, but they stand almost united in opposing any kind of government action to solve it. I think Michael Chong being one of the few outriders, if you recall, he was a leadership candidate in the campaign that Andrew Scheer won. There are few conservative voices. There are certainly voices within the industry in Alberta too that accept that climate change is happening and that something has to be done about it. But I do think there's a real break between conservatives and the rest.
Okay. Corey Morrow says on Facebook, we obviously need a better education system. He goes on to say we're not as dumb as the Yankees, but it's a slippery slope for sure. Charles?
Look, I think the progressives set themselves up for a bit of a rhetorical slap in the face here, and here's what I mean by that. If the progressive forces, that would include the Minister Catherine McKenna, if she wants to define how much we care, those of us on the conservative side, how much we care about climate change, if she wants to define that by how enthusiastic we are about paying carbon taxes, you know, as they say in the States, that dog don't hunt.
Well, let's play what this past Sunday Canada's Minister of the Environment and Climate Change said about how to get people on board with the government's climate change plans. Take a listen.
But let's be clear, like, climate change has huge costs now. I have no time for folks who are like, you know, we shouldn't take action. Like,
you know, you have no time. You gotta have time. You gotta. Well, your job is to have time for folks that care about this issue and want to understand it.
I don't have time for politicians that play cynical games about climate action. The cost right now is in the billions of dollars.
But
the economic
politicians
opportunity.
have priorities. You gotta have. This is the problem that people say, the liberal smack of arrogance. Your job is to have time for people who disagree with you.
I have time for Canadians who disagree with me, and I have conversations with them all the time. I meet with people. I meet with businesses.
Elected leaders are Canadians. You know that.
But I don't have time for politicians who pretend that climate change isn't real. Well, how can we do this? I have 3 kids.
Okay, obviously that was from CTV's question period on Sunday morning with Evan Solomon. What's your reaction to the minister's argument with Evan Solomon there, Susan?
Well, I get what she was saying. I think she was being badgered a bit. She was essentially saying she has no time for politicians who actually know in their heart of hearts that climate change is happening, but really for a variety of reasons, mostly political survival, don't want to face it and deal with it. I think that's a valid point. She's on a slightly trickier ground, though, when she talks about hypocrisy, because in my view, the big problem, in my view, Charles will probably not agree with me, there are no real champions of serious action of climate change in Ottawa, except for Elizabeth May. The NDP, for a variety of reasons, are all over the map on this issue. They're kind of all confused anyway, because Jagmeet Singh hasn't really taken hold of the caucus yet and provided leadership. The Liberals want it both ways. They keep saying, you know, the environment and the economy go hand in hand, and they do. But you see the signs at protest marches. Climate leaders don't build pipelines, and I think those signs are absolutely true. I think they're trying to have it both ways, and really, if you do, they're supposed to be an evidence-based. They try to make policy based on evidence, and all the evidence suggests that there's no way that Canada is going to meet the Paris goals, that the carbon pricing that Trudeau is tentatively introducing is not going to do it. It's too minimal. So they're talking out of both sides of the mouth in a way too.
Charles?
Well, look, I think that Catherine McKenna generally gives very, very good political theater. She clearly had a bad day, and I don't know whether she got badgered. I mean, that's Susan's view, she got badgered. I think she just got a darn good interview from a very prepared host, Evan Solomon. And I think what happened here was she delivered terrible political theater. Once you say, I don't have time for it, really doesn't matter what the object is of the predicate. Even Vladimir Putin, who wipes some of his enemies out, when he's public, he never says, I don't have time for a dialogue with whomever. So it's poor form in a dictatorship, and it's really not very smart to do, politically not intelligent in a democracy like Canada.
Susan?
Well, I think the incident was overblown. I mean, I wouldn't maybe laugh in the face of somebody who believed that the Earth was flat, but at a certain point you have to say, wait, that's simply not true. That's ridiculous, in fact.
The conversation wasn't about the Earth being flat, Susan. I think you know that. The conversation was about carbon taxes, and the minister's point of view is if you're not prepared to pay, or you're not enthusiastic about carbon taxes, well, you must be one of those flat earthers.
No,
that's what she was saying.
I thought she was saying that she had no time for climate deniers at this stage in the game.
No, but it flowed from, but root causes matter, Susan, and the root was the carbon tax conversation. That's how she slid into, and that's generally what the Liberals do when they don't want to talk about carbon taxes. They switch focus to, well, are you a three-headed monster? Are you a climate change denier? Are you a flat earther? And that change of the subject, I think it does appeal to the so-called progressive base, but it does nothing to warm up conservatives to the subject.
Can a carbon tax carry support, though, if the science isn't understood?
I think the problem is that the whole, and like Charles, I don't have a background in science at all. I think the problem is that the solutions are disconnected in the public mind from the problems, and it's hard to make that connection. Carbon tax is supposed to, drive behavior in a direction of avoiding pollution. And it's, by returning the money collected through the carbon tax in the form of lower income taxes, it's supposed to, kind of balance out. But it's, people don't believe government when they say this is going to be revenue neutral for a lot of good reasons. And B, it's hard to imagine. It's just hard to make that link. I think any government would be far more successful with more modest and tangible programs that people could grasp. Green renovations, for example, help for green renovations, perhaps different ways of supporting behavior that reduces our carbon emissions. Some of these have been tried tentatively, but if you want buy-in, I think that's how you're going to get it.
Okay. All right. Well, we'll leave it there. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. Good conversation, and we'll talk to you soon. Okay. Bye-bye. Charles Adler and Susan Riley in Vancouver and Ottawa tonight. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau has linked the recent expulsion of 4 Russian diplomats to last year's alleged smear campaign directed against Foreign Affairs Minister Chrystia Freeland. The details coming up.